The Madeleine McCann case continues to shock the world. Now, a woman who claims to be the missing girl has been arrested in the United Kingdom, but the reason for her arrest may be even more surprising than you imagine. Imagine being in the middle of a busy airport, watching the departure screens, hearing the announcements over the loudspeaker, feeling the bustle of people coming and going. Suddenly, a group of police officers discreetly approaches a woman. She appears tense, takes a deep breath, and looks around as if searching for an escape. But there is nowhere to run. In a matter of seconds, she is handcuffed. Curious passengers try to understand what is happening. Who is she? What did she do? What could justify such a sudden arrest? The answer comes quickly. Julia Wandelt, a name that until recently seemed like just another among many figures on the internet, but which for some carried enormous weight. After all, Julia spent months claiming to be Madeleine McCann, the girl who disappeared in 2007. Even after a DNA test proved she was not, Julia refused to accept the truth. And now, under the incredulous eyes at Bristol Airport, she was officially detained. But the reason? That detail would make the case nor for lying to the media. What happened was much more serious. Julia Wandelt was charged with stalking the McCann family, messages, phone calls, attempts at contact, until she crossed a dangerous line. Her obsession, once confined to social media, turned into a real threat. But how did a simple internet theory bring a woman to this point? How can someone be so deeply convinced of a lie as to risk their own freedom? The answer to that question is even more disturbing than you imagine. Most people who spread false theories on the internet do so behind a screen, in the comfort of their home. They create posts, discuss in forums, and maybe even make YouTube videos, but they rarely leave the virtual world. Julia, however, went further. She took her belief into the real world, and that put her on a collision course with the law. And here's the most frightening detail. Julia truly believed she was Madeleine. Even after a DNA test proved there was no link between her and the McCann family, she insisted the tests were wrong. To her, there was a conspiracy underway. Something bigger was being hidden. And that brings us to an unsettling question. What if she wasn't just lying? What if Julia truly believed her own story? It wouldn't be the first time someone is convinced of a lie to the point of living it as absolute truth. There are cases of people who claim to be heirs to vast fortunes, victims of crimes never committed, and even missing relatives of famous families. But Julia took it to another level. She didn't just say she was Madeleine. She tried to infiltrate the McCann's lives. She stalked the family, attempted contact with the girl's siblings, and went as far as traveling to the United Kingdom to physically approach them. This ceased to be a simple online controversy. It was a serious case of obsession, and the police recognized the danger before it was too late. Now imagine the impact this had on the McCann family. Since 2007, they have lived with a pain that never heals. Madeleine's disappearance changed their lives forever. Every year, new theories, false leads, and supposed sightings emerge, but nothing prepared them for Julia Wandelt. First came the surprise, a young Polish woman claiming to be Madeleine. Then came the frustration. Social media exploded with the theory, and even when the DNA proved it was a lie, the McCann name once again made headlines. But then, fear took over. Julia did not disappear after the DNA revelation. On the contrary, she became even more insistent. She created fake accounts to try to reach the McCanns. She sent emails and direct messages to Madeleine's siblings. She called people close to the family, trying to convince them that something was wrong. And the obsession grew. Julia traveled to the United Kingdom. She began circulating in places connected to the case. She asked questions. She wanted information. At that moment, the McCanns realized they were not just dealing with a confused woman. They were being stalked. And when Julia was spotted at Bristol Airport, they knew action was needed before things got even more dangerous. But what exactly was going through Julia Wandelt's mind? How can someone be so deeply convinced of an identity that isn't theirs? Imagine a woman sitting in front of a computer. She watches a video about Madeleine McCann. Then she sees another, and another. In a short time, she begins to notice similarities between her own life and the case. Small details, memory lapses, uncertainties about the past. The obsession grows. She compares photos, analyzes scars, finds clues where there are none, until one day she is sure she is Madeleine. It doesn't matter what others say. It doesn't matter what the DNA says. She knows it's true. This is the fine line between illusion and real danger. And here is where things get even stranger. Did Julia Wandelt really believe this story? Or was it all one big manipulation? Her arrest may have closed that chapter, but what if there are others like her? Julia's case raises a disturbing question. How far can an obsession with a mystery drive someone? If you want to find out how this fixation led Julia Wandelt to arrest and what it means for criminal cases in the digital world, keep watching. The truth is even more disturbing than it seems. It all began almost innocently. Julia Wandelt, a then unknown young Polish woman, appeared in 2023 claiming to have fragmented memories of her childhood and suspecting that she might be Madeleine McCann. At first, it was just another story among the many theories circulating on the internet, but something was different this time. The world took notice. Her physical features, a few coincidences, and the way Julia spoke made her story go viral quickly. She wanted answers, but she wanted more than the internet. One click can transform any unlikely theory into a truth for those who want to believe it. The international media quickly picked up the case. Julia appeared in interviews, gave emotional statements, and, at the height of the controversy, even went on the Dr. Phil show, where experts analyzed her case. It was there that the truth emerged undeniably. A DNA test proved that Julia was not Madeleine. That should have been the end of the story. For anyone else, perhaps it would have been, but not for Julia. She did not accept the result. That's when the tone of the story changed. If before Julia appeared crying, asking for answers, now she seemed outraged. She said something was wrong, that the authorities were covering up the truth, that the DNA had been manipulated. And, even more frightening, she began to speak directly with the McCanns. First, it was direct messages on Instagram, then emails, letters. She started creating fake accounts to try to contact them by any means possible. With every silence from the McCann family, Julia's obsession grew. And what was just an absurd internet theory soon became a real problem, with dangerous consequences. In the following months, Julia intensified her fixation. She wasn't just sending messages, she was trying to infiltrate the McCanns' lives. The family began to notice something was wrong when close friends reported strange phone calls. People who worked in the McCanns' social circle were receiving questions about them. Julia wanted to know where they were, who they talked to, what they did. And then came the most frightening decision. She went to the United Kingdom. Julia traveled to places linked to Madeleine's disappearance. She visited the house where the McCanns lived, walked through the streets the family frequented, asked questions. She wanted to get closer. That was the moment when the case stopped being an innocuous internet theory and became a real risk for the McCanns. The police began to monitor Julia. They knew that if they didn't act quickly, things could get worse. Then on February 19th, 2025, at a busy Bristol airport, Julia was arrested. She and a woman accompanying her were detained on charges of criminal stalking. At that moment, the authorities knew they were not just arresting someone who believed in an absurd theory. They were breaking a dangerous cycle of obsession. But the question that still haunted everyone was, did Julia know she was lying? Or did she truly believe she was Madeleine McCann? And even more concerning, what if there are other people like her? What happened to Julia Wandelt may serve as a warning of something much larger. And that is what we are going to explore now. When Julia Wandelt was handcuffed at Bristol Airport, her face turned into a mix of shock and anger. The voices of the police mingled with the terminal's hum, but she seemed to hear nothing except her own racing heartbeat. "This is a mistake. I need to talk to them," she insisted, her breathing rapid, her eyes wide. But the officers weren't there to discuss. They knew exactly who she was and why they were taking her away. Julia tried to break free, but the firm grip on her arm made it clear there was no way out. It was the end of the line. As she was let out of the airport, passengers watched the scene, some filming with their cell phones, others just whispering among themselves. Who was that woman? What had she done? The news of the arrest spread quickly. Within hours, UK news portals were already flashing bombastic headlines. Woman claiming to be Madeleine McCann, arrested for criminal stalking. Behind the scenes, the McCanns received the news with silent relief, but without any celebration. They were used to being haunted by Madeleine's case, but this time, it wasn't just another stranger from the internet. It was someone who had crossed the line between obsession and real danger. Kate McCann clutched the phone tightly, her fingers white from tension. She said nothing for a few seconds, just taking a deep breath. "She's been arrested." Jerry McCann broke the silence. His voice was more restrained than relieved. Kate nodded slowly, but inside, one question continued to echo. What if she had managed to get even closer? The danger had passed, at least for now. But did Julia really know what she was doing, or did she believe every word she said? Part 2, The Shocking Revelation, 350 words. While Julia was being interrogated, the detectives tried to understand the extent of her belief that she was Madeleine McCann. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" one of the officers asked. Julia kept her gaze fixed on the table, her hands trembling slightly. "I just wanted to talk to them. They need to know. They need to listen to me." The most frightening thing was the tone of certainty in her voice. There was no hesitation, no pretense. She truly believed disturbing details. Julia not only had fake accounts to contact the McCanns, but she also kept obsessive notes about the family. There were dates, locations, information gathered over months. She wasn't just following a delusion. She planned every step. The police found messages she had sent to acquaintances in the previous months, saying things like, "I will prove that I am Madeleine. They are hiding something. I need to reach them." This confirmed what many feared. Julia hadn't given up even after the DNA results. She traveled to the United Kingdom because she wanted an answer directly from the McCanns. And what if the police hadn't acted? What if Julia had managed to get even closer? Now, with Julia in custody, the biggest question still remained. Was she just a woman with a dangerous obsession? Or was there something more to the story? And what does this obsession say about the true impact of the Madeleine McCann case on the world? With Julia now behind bars, the main question needed to be answered. Did she know she was lying, or did she truly believe she was Madeleine McCann? Investigations revealed two possible scenarios. In the first, Julia knew she was not Madeleine, but used the public attention to become a well-known figure. She gained followers, media space, and even international interviews. Even when the DNA test disproved her story, she refused to stop. If she gave up, she would lose everything she had built with that lie. So instead of admitting the truth, she doubled down, and that's when she crossed the line. In the second scenario, Julia might have truly believed she was Madeleine. This kind of delusion is not uncommon. There are documented cases of people developing false memories over time, especially when they have gaps in their own past. Some experts suggest that Julia might have suffered from a psychological disorder that reinforced this belief until it became her only reality. The media attention and the flood of online theories fed into that idea, making her unable to accept the truth of the DNA. Regardless of the reason, the result was the same. Julia crossed a dangerous line and became a real threat to the McCanns. Her arrest wasn't just about a woman with an absurd theory, it was a warning about the impact that unresolved cases can have on people's minds. Now, the most important question, how many other people might be convincing themselves of false stories in the same way Julia did? The Julia Wandelt case shows a much bigger problem. How far can an obsession with an unsolved mystery drive a person? The internet has allowed conspiracy theories to spread rapidly. People search for answers to mysteries, try to deliver their own version of justice, and often end up crossing the line of what is safe or rational. The Madeleine McCann case has always been one of the most debated in the world, and Julia is proof that some people can lose themselves in that pursuit. The impact on the McCanns is undeniable. Since 2007, they have lived in a constant cycle of new theories, false hopes, and stalkings. Every person who appears claiming to be Madeleine reopens the wound of a trauma that never healed. But this case also raises another question. Can this kind of obsession happen to anyone? Julia started as an unknown on the internet, but in just a few months, her belief drove her to a point of no return. If she hadn't been arrested, how far could she have gone? If there is one thing we can learn from this story, it is that the obsession with the unknown has real consequences. And you? Do you believe Julia Wandelt was just a manipulator in search of fame, or a victim of her own mind? Leave your opinion in the comments. Julia Wandelt's story makes us wonder, how far can an obsession with a mystery drive someone? The Madeleine McCann case has lasted for over 15 years, and with each new theory, the truth seems even more elusive. But Julia wasn't the first, and with the internet fueling this kind of behavior, she is unlikely to be the last. What scares me most is how social media can turn any suspicion into fact and any person into the protagonist of a story that isn't theirs. Are we creating an environment where truth becomes just a matter of narrative? Now, I want to know your opinion. Did Julia Wandelt know she was lying, or did she truly believe she was Madeleine? Leave your comment down below. And if you watched until here, write "I see the signs" so I know you stayed with me until the end. Oh, and if you like diving into real cases and understanding what happens behind the scenes of investigations, I have a special recommendation for you. There is a book that delves exactly into these themes: the obsession with mystery, the impact of the media, and the consequences of poorly conducted investigations. I left the link in the first pinned comment. Check it out because it's well worth it.